Joyous Feast.
Joyous Feast.
We should have Vespers this Wednesday. Tuesday night there'll be a Zoom discussion regarding this past week's kind of devotional theme, that God is our fortress and our strength, our refuge in great afflictions that befall us, and so we shall not be frightened. That was the Psalm verse that we've been meditating on this week. And so Tuesday night we'll discuss that. And Wednesday we'll likely have Vespers, although I haven't put anything on the calendar yet. And then next week, God willing, and with the approval of our vicar in this region, Father Andrew, we've submitted all of the plan for our reopening. We've checked off, how we're going to fulfill all of the requirements of the metropolis for us to reopen. And so we're hoping that the first liturgy, where we'll have people in attendance in a larger number, about 15 people, plus servers, so about 20 people really, that hopefully that day will be Saturday morning for Divine Liturgy, and then continuing on Sunday morning for Divine Liturgy. And of course next Sunday is the great feast of Holy Pentecost. And so it's a beautiful time for us to be able to gather again on that great feast when the Holy Spirit descends and manifests, reveals this reality of the church in the world. This a community that's called out into living communion with God that exists from the foundation of creation, but is finally brought about and manifest in truth and in holiness on the day of Pentecost. And so may the Lord draw us together on that day. There will be information coming out this week about how to reserve a place at the Divine Liturgy. I sent an email earlier this week with instructions about how to use Sign Up Genius, and I'll send another one this week along with the actual link to go to Sign Up Genius to sign up. There's a couple people in our church that don't have access to email or the internet, and so we'll be contacting them directly and signing them up. So the parish council members and myself will sign people up individually for services that they want to attend. And I said this in the email, but I'll repeat it now. The reason that we chose to go this route of having people reserve a space, there were several reasons. One is because we have limited attendance, and we had to figure out a way to deal with that. The other reason is that we know that if we were to divide, let's say we went through the roster of our parish members, including catechumens and the faithful and all these people, and maybe divided up alphabetically, or did 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, or 1, 2, 3, 4, or something like that, and group people in that way, it's very likely, we know this for a fact, that we would assign people to come to liturgy that weren't even here, that are out of town, or we might end up assigning people to liturgy that aren't necessarily comfortable coming back to church yet. And so then we put them in an awkward position of having to call the church and say, I'm uncomfortable coming, please take my name off the list. And so we don't want to do that. So having the sign up online allows people to make the choice for themselves, and also if it comes to be, so we were requesting that when you sign up, because we have limited attendance, if we offer Divine Liturgy on Saturday and Sunday every week, it seems like within 3 weeks to 4 weeks, every one of our regular parishioners that's usually here, we usually have sometimes around 90 people, so, somewhere around there, should be able to attend. one of the divine liturgies, so once a month. And so we ask that you just sign up for one, but if there's spaces available, if it comes time, it's Friday night, and there's 3 seats available, that nobody's reserved a spot, then we'll send out an email to the parish and we'll let you know. So it's possible that you could come more often than once a month. We just don't know how it's going to work out. And like I said, a lot of it depends on how comfortable people are with coming back to church. I know for a fact that many of the beautiful, venerable elders of our community they would have already been back at church, and so I know that that's the case. But then I know that there's other people that I've spoken with that maybe are a little bit hesitant and are probably going to wait a while, and that's fine. And so this system of doing things, hopefully it'll allow for the most flexibility for the most people, and it'll make sure that when people have signed up, that they're here, and we haven't, kind of gone through unnecessary work in vain in order to get people to sign up. And I am in the process of preparing an article related to Holy Communion and the method of distribution of Holy Communion, and why our parish is kind of essentially continuing in the way that we always have with the distribution of Holy Communion. And so I'm currently working on something to share with you the reasons why. And it's a difficult time for all of the. It's a difficult time, and I'll say this about what I've been preparing: is you have the praxis of the church, the way that we live, the way that we do things. And we've been doing it this way for 1,000 years, probably with the spoon. And then before that, 1,000 years with a common cup. And so people get freaked out about the spoon. Well, why wouldn't they get freaked out about a common cup? But at any rate, so we've been doing this for a long time. The praxis of the church, the way that we go about doing things, reveals something about what we believe. You see that? What we do reflects what we believe. But the issue with the concern over, I guess, sanitary things within the life of the church has never been a concern up until, I would say, maybe about 40 years ago. There were questions. It was during the AIDS crisis that people first started saying, I don't know about distributing Holy Communion with the spoon. Is that a good idea? And so this started about 40 years ago. But like I said, the church had sort of silently, and maybe a better word would be tacitly, put forward an understanding that Holy Communion is not going to get people sick. And like I said, that's reflected just in our praxis, in what we do, what we've been doing. And but then the question arises, and now what do you have to do? You have to say something. You have to reply to that question, And some of the first replies were very poor. We can admit that. When people say things like, well, there's hot water that we add to communion, and so that'll kill the germs. Or there's alcohol in the wine, and that'll kill. It's like none of these things are even remotely demonstrable in a scientific way, And but people said these things, and it's because they're trying to pastors, priests, like we want to meet people where they're at, and kind of it's like I understand that you're afraid, but here's some reasons why. And unfortunately, when we begin to speak, sometimes we say things that just aren't true. But then on the other hand, as I said, the praxis of the church demonstrates something very fundamental about what we believe, that Holy Communion is not going to get people sick. We continue to come to church to receive communion in the same manner through plagues in the past. We didn't change our way of doing things in order to accommodate fears. And so I think, it's something that needs to be discussed. The sort of poor attempts at putting something forward, to justify the praxis and life of the church need to be dealt with, and we need to stop saying them. They need to be put away. But then also, this is a time where we have to begin to articulate and speak about why we do what we do, and why we draw near with the fear of God and faith and love, but not the fear of viruses or the fear of it, And so we have to begin to speak about that. And it becomes doubly difficult because we don't want to create an environment within our churches where anybody that asks a question is viewed suspiciously and as if they don't have enough faith and all this other stuff. And it's like, when has God ever done that to me? And when has he ever said, like, either do this or else? You know what I mean? In terms of that kind of like domineering, you know what I mean? Like, you just need to get over it. It's like God doesn't, in our relationship with the living God throughout our lives, like, he doesn't deal with us that way. Unless we're arrogant, and proud. And because then we might need like a swift knock on the head so that we're like, oh, and, but he doesn't deal with us like that. So why, as priests, we're not going to deal with people like that, coming down on them and telling, just suck it up, And so we have to begin to speak about these things in a way that's faithful to what the church has taught, and that accurately kind of speaks about the reasons why the church has done the things that it does and the way that we do things. And this is a big challenge. So pray for your priests, pray for your hierarchs. You can think, the iconoclastic controversy in our church, when people start, so you have the practice, everybody venerates icons, and then somebody comes along and says, you can't venerate icons, what are you doing? And, or you have the situation that we commemorate today, where you have the First Ecumenical Council. You have the church going along with its belief, giving glory to the Father, to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, one in essence and undivided. You have all of this, the worship life of the church. And then Arius comes along and he says, oh yeah, except the Son is not begotten of the Father. The Son is not co-equal with the Father. He's not of the same essence, but he's a lesser creation that God made. And so he comes along and says that, and at first you kind of just, people scratch the, wait, what? What is he saying? But how do you reply? What do you say? And I can tell you, and then certainly with iconography, the same thing happens, where the church is going along, venerating icons, and then somebody comes along and says, you shouldn't do this. This is not right. And the church says, well, what do you mean it's not? This is what we've done. And they say, no, this is wrong. And then, something that the church had been doing and been living, suddenly we have to speak about something that we never had to say anything about before. Because everybody just sort of knew. This is what we do. And when you begin to speak, I guarantee, we have the writings of St. John of Damascus, St. Theodore the Studite. I guarantee that there were all sorts of priests and bishops saying things about why we venerate icons that weren't necessarily accurate. Because they're responding to the question for the very first time. God raises up people in that generation, and he'll raise up people now that'll be able to speak and answer these questions in a way that's clear, and that the entire church can look at and go, that's it. That's why, you know? And, but for the time being, people will say things. Like I said, it's already happened. People say these things about, you know, the gold has antimicrobial properties that's going to, like, kill virus. And it's like, what are we talking about? Well, this is insane. You know, we're turning a matter of faith and trust in God into something that we're trying to base in, like, pseudoscience. That's crazy. And now people might say, well, you're crazy not to be worried, you know, that Holy Communion could transmit disease. And I struggle with that a lot. And to one extent, you know, I think, well, maybe they're right. Maybe we're being arrogant. Maybe we're thinking that we can just walk on water. You know, Peter walked on water, so I'm going to go to Watson Lake and just jump out there and I'll be able to walk on water. Is that what we're doing? Possibly. Some people are doing that. I would say no. That's not what we're doing. Why? Because we have at least close to 1,000 years of using the spoon, even in times of plague, and no one was ever concerned. We have, and even the priests that'll put forward and say, well, maybe we can make accommodations for people because they're fearful. We can use multiple spoons, stuff like that. I know all of those priests, even though they make accommodations, they know that they've communed of the holy body and blood of Christ every Sunday, in some cases in large communities, after hundreds of other people. And they do that every week, throughout their entire life. And they don't get sick any more than anyone else. You know? They're not somehow like more vulnerable to disease by doing that or something, you know. And so again, when we consider the practice of the life of the church and its outcomes throughout history, it makes it so that, yes, this is a matter of faith, but it's not in a matter of hubris before God. It's a matter of trust that's born from experience, which really is our entire faith, you know. And so, may the Lord help us in that regard to speak clearly, and as we go forward, and may He have mercy on us, and also maybe teach us as often as we can to kind of zip our mouths and maybe not be slow to speak about all of these things.